For 30 years, Frank Mercer was the one person Irene Holloway trusted with every dollar her business ever earned. He wasn't just her accountant. He was family in everything but name. Then, after Irene's health began to fail, a single signature changed everything. Her $3.4 million business no longer belonged to her family. It had quietly been transferred to Frank's own son. Her devoted daughter, Cassandra, believed it was the ultimate betrayal. But inside the courtroom, an astonishing truth emerged. The man everyone accused of stealing the business had been deceived as well. Stay with us until the very end, because today's story proves that the most devastating inheritance fraud doesn't always create just one victim. Sometimes it turns a trusted friend into an unwilling weapon against the very family they were trying to protect. Irene Holloway was 83 years old and had spent her adult life building a commercial linen supply company in Memphis, Tennessee, from a single delivery van and a list of 12 restaurant clients into a regional operation serving hotels, hospitals, and food service businesses across the Mid-South. By the time her health began to decline in 2021, the business carried an estimated value of $3.4 million and employed 31 people, most of whom had worked for her for more than a decade. Her daughter Cassandra, 49, had grown up watching her mother run the business and had remained close to her through every stage of its growth. Cassandra had her own career in healthcare administration and had never taken a formal role in the company, but she had always understood its importance, both financially and as the thing her mother had built with her own hands over 50 years. Frank Mercer had been Irene's accountant since 1992. He had managed every tax filing, every audit, every quarterly review, and every significant financial decision the company had ever made. He attended her grandson's graduation, he came to her husband's funeral, he called on her birthday every year without exception. Irene told Cassandra once that if anything ever happened to her, Frank would know what to do. She meant it as comfort. She did not know how complicated those words would become. Marcus Mercer, 38, had worked in commercial real estate before a series of failed investments had left him carrying significant debt and a diminishing professional reputation. He had observed his father's relationship with Irene Holloway for years and had developed a precise understanding of exactly what that relationship gave his father access to. In early 2022, as Irene's health worsened following a cardiac event, Marcus approached his father with what he described as a plan to protect the business. He told Frank that Irene's estate would face significant complications if the business passed through probate without a clear succession structure in place. He told Frank that establishing a formal partnership agreement now, while Irene was still alive, would protect the employees, protect the company's contracts, and ensure continuity that a probate process could never guarantee. Frank listened carefully. He had genuine affection for Irene and genuine concern about what would happen to her company after she was gone. Marcus presented him with documents he said had been prepared by a business attorney. Frank reviewed them briefly, satisfied that the language sounded appropriate, and did not engage his own independent counsel to review them separately. What the documents actually contained was a partnership dissolution and transfer agreement that restructured the company's ownership entirely. Under the agreement, Irene's sole ownership stake was dissolved and replaced by a new partnership in which Marcus Mercer held a 60% controlling interest, with the remaining 40% held in a management trust Frank had been told would protect the business during any transition period. The documents required Irene's signature to be valid. Frank brought them to Irene on a Tuesday afternoon in March of 2022. He explained them as a business continuity plan that would protect everything she had built. Irene, who was managing significant fatigue and had been advised by her physician to limit complex decision-making activities during her recovery, trusted Frank completely and signed where he indicated. She did not read the documents carefully. She had never needed to before. Marcus filed the partnership agreement with the Tennessee Secretary of State within days. He then began exercising his controlling interest, signing contracts in the company's name, redirecting vendor communications through new contact information, and initiating discussions with two of the company's largest clients about contract renewals that would be structured under the new ownership arrangement. Irene passed away in July of 2022. When Cassandra met with the estate attorney to begin the settlement process, she was told the business no longer belonged to her mother's estate. It had been transferred to a partnership in which a man she had never heard of held majority control.
Cassandra retained attorney Michelle Ford, a business and probate litigator in Memphis with 19 years of experience. When Michelle reviewed the partnership agreement, she identified several provisions that were inconsistent with standard business continuity documents and immediately requested a full review of the circumstances surrounding its execution. She obtained Irene's medical records from March of 2022. The records documented that Irene had been advised by her cardiologist to avoid complex cognitive tasks during her recovery, and that her condition at the time of the signing would have significantly compromised her ability to understand a document restructuring the ownership of a 30-year-old business. Michelle then contacted Frank Mercer directly. What happened in that conversation was not what she had anticipated. Frank was confused. He asked Michelle why she was contacting him about a business continuity document. When Michelle described what the document actually contained and explained that Marcus now held controlling interest in Irene's company, Frank went silent for a long time. He had not read the documents carefully enough to understand what Marcus had inserted. He had reviewed the general structure and trusted that his son had represented its contents accurately. He had believed genuinely that he was protecting Irene's legacy. Frank retained his own attorney immediately and agreed to full cooperation with the investigation. He provided a sworn statement confirming that Marcus had presented the documents to him as a protective measure, that he had not independently verified their contents with separate counsel, and that he had not understood the true effect of the ownership transfer when he brought them to Irene for signature. Michelle's forensic review of the company's records revealed that Marcus had already redirected $47,000 in company revenue to accounts he controlled in the weeks following the filing, and had been in discussions with a private equity firm about a potential acquisition of the company at a significantly below-market price that would have generated a quick personal return for Marcus while eliminating any remaining value for Irene's estate. The hearing was held before the Honorable Judge Angela Rhodes at the Shelby County Circuit Court in Memphis. Michelle Ford presented Irene's medical records documenting her compromised capacity at signing, Frank's sworn cooperation statement, the forensic financial analysis showing Marcus's revenue redirection, and evidence of the acquisition discussions Marcus had initiated. She called Frank to testify. He sat in the witness box at 67 years old and told the court everything. He described the conversations with Marcus, the documents Marcus had presented him, and the moment he had understood what had actually happened. He told the court that he had spent 30 years trying to protect Irene Holloway's interests, and that the worst thing he had ever done was trust his own son to help him do it one final time. Marcus's attorney argued the partnership agreement was a valid business document executed with appropriate authorization. Michelle Ford asked the court to consider how authorization could be valid when the person providing it had been documented by her own physician as cognitively compromised at the time of signing, had never been shown the document's true contents in plain language, and had relied entirely on the representation of a man who had himself been deceived about what he was presenting. Judge Angela Rhodes ruled the partnership agreement void in its entirety, finding that Irene had lacked the capacity to provide informed consent and that the document had been procured through misrepresentation both of Irene and of Frank. She ordered the business restored to Irene's estate and referred Marcus Mercer to the Shelby County District Attorney for fraud, elder financial exploitation, and criminal misappropriation of business assets. Marcus was convicted on all counts and sentenced to 7 years in Tennessee State Prison. Frank Mercer was not charged criminally, given his cooperation and the court's finding that he had been deceived. The Tennessee Board of Accountancy opened a separate review of his professional conduct, which resulted in a formal censure and a requirement for additional supervision of his practice. Cassandra Holloway took over management of her mother's company following the court's order restoring it to the estate. She kept every employee. She called each of them personally to tell them the business was safe. She also called Frank Mercer. The conversation was brief. She told him she did not blame him for what his son had done. She told him her mother had trusted him for 30 years and that she believed her mother's judgment had not been wrong. Irene Holloway spent 50 years building something that outlasted her. A young man who had watched that building from a distance decided he was entitled to take it. The court ensured he was wrong, and the man who had been used to deliver the crime became, in the end, the witness who helped undo it. Would you have trusted a lifelong accountant the way Irene did? Tell us in the comments below. And if this story moved you, subscribe to Court of Shadows for more courtroom drama stories every week.